I want to talk about the real cost of getting a senior hire wrong in a private equity-backed company.
When you make the wrong hire, I think minimally it costs you really 9 months to 12 months of delay in creating value in the company. So I would put the number out there. It's like $1 million at least.
Today's guest is Angela Geffre, industrial organizational psychologist and head of human capital at GrowthCurve Capital. She is here to explain why people decisions matter just as much as the financial ones.
Sometimes the people that are best for the business are people that you actually don't like. Having a good dinner conversation, not usually a predictor of success. I think IO psychologists are the best suited for this world because we know how to drive outcomes. None of these companies would be able to have the spike in growth if they didn't have the right people in the right seats at the right time.
Talk a little bit about how someone like you, an organizational psychologist, right? You're bringing all of this scientific method. Talk about what that scientific mindset that you bring actually looks like in practice in the work that you're doing.
Yes, so I think about everything in terms of data. So how do we predict human behavior based on data? Ultimately, this is how I think about it.
Hi, welcome to Human Capital Quantified. I'm Dr. Sandy Fiaschetti, and I have as my special guest today, Dr. Angela Geffre, who is head of human capital talent at GrowthCurve Capital. Angela, I'm so glad you're here with me. I would love to hear more from you about you. I might have even gotten your title wrong. I don't know. Tell everyone who you are, what you do. Talk a little bit about GrowthCurve and how you sit in the private equity ecosystem, please.
Yes, of course. And thank you for having me, Sandy. I always love having a conversation with you. So you got my title right. I am the head of human capital at GrowthCurve. And GrowthCurve is a very unique place. We have a strategy where we buy data-rich companies in financial services, healthcare, and technology. And then we take that data and do something with it in machine learning or artificial intelligence. Plus, work on a digital transformation or a tech transformation, and we pay special attention to human capital because we think talent creates value. So none of these companies would be able to kind of have the spike in growth if they didn't have the right people in the right seats at the right time. So what does my job actually entail every day? I work across our portfolio companies, so across those different industry verticals. I sit on the investment committee, which means I get to take a look at each company. I get to participate in diligence for that company. And then I have an opinion about whether we should buy it or not based on the organization and the leadership and how the organization is designed and whether I think, we can grow and how we will grow. So that is a unique position in private equity. Often the human capital leads aren't on the investment committee. So it is a great position with a lot of kind of inside track and real seat at the table to influence the decisions we make on which companies we'll buy and how we're going to grow them.
Amazing. There's so much in there. That is why I asked you to come on here. One of the things you talked about was basically your premise that human capital delivers value creation. And so most of our conversation is going to unpack that. Before we get there, though, talk a little bit about how someone like you, someone like me, an organizational psychologist, right? We have that in common. How you ended up with that background in the world of private equity?
Yes, so that is a great question. I did not plan to be here, and I don't even think I knew what private equity was when I graduated with my PhD. Sandy, early on, you were actually a big inspiration. So I think at the time you were working at Daimler, Chrysler, whatever they were called at the time. And you showed me how much IOs could influence and impact the business and help in the growth story and also just like help run the company. So I started my career in consumer products at Procter & Gamble and then spent 6.5 years there, worked on the Gillette acquisition for Procter, which was a very, very large acquisition. Then went over to Kellogg, the cereal company, so stayed in consumer products really for 12 and a half years. And then went into professional services at JLL, a giant commercial real estate firm, not the private equity firm, and was having a great time. I was the global head of talent for JLL. We hired 30,000 people a year. So massive challenge to fill that many roles in a single year. And then I got a call after the pandemic hit to potentially entertain joining a private equity firm. And at the time in consumer products, you grow up kind of fearing private equity because you do zero-based budgeting and you do all these exercises to make sure you are as lean as possible so you'll be unattractive to private equity. So I had spent most of my career up until that point working like that. So making sure all of our, we are operating as lean as possible. We had, every penny we spent, we knew exactly where it was going and it was for a good reason. And then I got called and I'm like, that's kind of interesting. And what attracted me to join my first private equity firm was working across industries. So they did consumer business services, healthcare, tech, and industrials. And so I'm like, in a given day, I could work on many different problems. And that sounds kind of interesting. And I think IOs are uniquely positioned to add value in these sorts of situations because we think about everything from a cause and effect and a data perspective. And I'm like, given that the smartest people in the world are in private equity thinking through numbers and they're the best at financial engineering, I think I can add real value on the org side of things. So that became super appealing. So I did it. So I just packed up the minivan and we moved the family to Florida at the time. And then spent, 2.5 years learning about private equity, understanding what it takes to drive value in mid-market companies. And then actually I got a call from you to join where I am now in GrowthCurve because they have a great, unique strategy. And I've kind of spent my whole life trying to think about how do we automate work? How do we make the work so that humans are focused on the things that humans can uniquely add value? And how do we automate the rest of the stuff, get rid of the tactical stuff, get rid of the admin stuff, and free up our brains to actually solve big problems? So when I heard about the strategy at GrowthCurve, I was immediately interested and decided then to pack up the minivan again. We still have the same minivan and move to New York.
Love it. But here you are in New York at GrowthCurve Capital, and you're bringing all of this scientific method rigor with some practicality. And the whole point of this podcast series really is about taking the myth of, the people stuff is touchy-feely, it's squishy, you can't quantify it. I know how to do it because I talk to people, all the things wrapped in that, and putting a different spin on it and saying, hey, did you know there's a field called industrial organizational psychology? Hey, there's a scientific method, etc. Talk about what that scientific mindset that you bring actually looks like in practice in the work that you're doing.
Yes. So I think about everything in terms of data. So, how do we predict human behavior based on data? I've spent a lot of my career trying to take bias out of selection systems. So I had a passion from a very young age of why do white males get all the top jobs? What can we do to make sure we have an even playing field for diverse talent to rise to the top and for diverse talent to even get into the finest companies in the world? So that's kind of where it all started. And I think in private equity, where everything is numbers based. So, how are you going to grow EBITDA? What exactly is, what are you going to do? And then what's the effect of that? IO psychology plays a really important role in that situation because we can articulate it. We can say hey, these are the 3 things we're going to do. And then I expect the impact to be X, but I'm going to measure it and I'm going to bring it back to you. So, creating these amazing dashboards where you not only have numbers goals in terms of the financials, but you have numbers goals in terms of the people. So, things like If we, how fast can we fill roles with the right people? Who are our critical talent and how do we know? Who are the people that are contributing the most to the growth in the EBITDA? Who are the people with the unique skills that can grow in the age of AI? So that is a problem I'm really focused on right now, because I think what it took to be successful 10 years ago is actually quite different than what it takes to be successful today. I think your mind has to be more adaptable, more flexible, and you have to kind of be really into experimentation with AI to get the most out of it. So we don't, with IO, how we learned about things is, I remember, first year in PhD program where we learned job analysis. So take roles and dissect them down into tasks and try to figure out, how important the different tasks are. Well, that is like super critical today to figure out what work can AI do for us? What work is uniquely human? And then what work do we need to work together with AI and humans together? So I think it's not just about measuring results. It's trying to figure out how do we get the best results in the fastest amount of time. In private equity, the faster we go, if we can return our capital to investors in 3 to 5 years, that is better than if we take 7 to 8 years. So how do we, inflect the growth as fast as possible? And that takes real science with the human behavior side and the talent side of things.
Yeah. You talked about the interplay between people issues and AI and the way job analysis really impacts AI. How do you see the workforce, just workforce decisions at portfolio companies being made now as you guys look at that intersection between AI and people? You alluded a little bit to it, like what can be taken out, where does the brain need to be, but just unpack that a little bit.
Yes. So interestingly, in my portfolio companies are treating this, they're looking at it a little differently. So from one extreme, one of my CHROs took all the HRIS data, so all the data in their system, roles, people, how much they're getting paid, and the tasks from the job description. So she basically put all the job descriptions, all the HRIS data into Claude and said, tell me, diagnose each one of these jobs and tell me what is most easy to automate, the easiest stuff to automate. And then bucket 2, things that will take a little bit more time or a little more effort to automate, but give me these different buckets and then tell me what is the dollar impact. So she did this with Claude, and it needs to be checked and it needs to be, oh, that's not quite right, use the human judgment in it. But I thought, wow, that's fantastic. Like, you did that with a click of the button. And I think back to all the times I did org design before AI, it would take months, right? So you would need to go out and survey everybody and find out exactly what they did. You'd have to go job shadow and figure out okay, what is the work? I think you still kind of need to do that to validate. However, what a great start. What a great start to even know what to tackle and where to focus first. So that was one approach. Another approach, actually, in another portfolio company, is my CHRO. He did start job shadowing. So he's like, I'm going to I see fat in this part of the organization compared to other portfolio companies. So I'm going to try and figure out, why are we fat there? So why are we spending $4 million on this work and all the other portfolio companies with similar sizes are spending $2 million? That's twice as much. What's going on in the inefficiencies in my company that maybe I can learn from? So he went and job shadowed and then put all the information into AI and got the summaries. So here's what I observed, here's what is happening, what can be automated. So again, using Claude to help, but he actually did the job shadowing versus starting with the Claude interpretation of the work based on the job descriptions.
In both of those cases, right, what I'm hearing is there isn't a one cookie cutter way to do it. You can start with some of the in-person and then you move to the tool, or you can do the reverse of that. But in both cases, you get efficiency if a smart person who knows what they're doing is behind the tool.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah. Garbage in, garbage out. So you also need to make sure the data going in is clean, good data. Yeah. Which we know from all of the scientific studies. I mean, again, back in the analog days, I would take forever to clean a data set. That, you still need to make sure everything makes sense going into the system.
So given that, I mean, you know, people kind of chicken little, right? Like, oh, jobs are going away, jobs are going away. What's the real on that? Like, I know I have a point of view, you have a point of view that human capital decisions are going to be even more critical. You're not losing brain work, right? Like, just make a statement on that.
Yeah.
The jobs aren't going away, the robots aren't taking over.
Yeah. So I think ultimately, this is how I think about it. Ultimately, we all, all of these jobs exist to serve humans. So if you think about professional services, if you think about consumer products, if you think about industrials, like at the end of the day, what are we doing? We're creating something to serve humans. And you probably need humans to help figure that out and to use your brain to go, okay, this doesn't quite make sense. Have your hypotheses, test your hypotheses. Can we move a lot faster now? Yes, but humans are still definitely needed. And we should be, because otherwise we'll end up creating stuff that ultimately probably doesn't serve humans very well and probably has a shorter shelf life at the end of the day. So if we want long, standing companies that stand the test of time, you still need humans making the decisions. You still need great, excellent judgment to make those decisions. But we can make work go faster. Some of the lower level work, I think work is going to be reshaped. So I do think about my first job coming out of the grad program when I was working at P&G, I was reading 140,000 open-ended comments and codifying them by sentiment. And I would the Excel spreadsheet. And I'd be this is positive. This is negative. This is the themes that came out. And the fact that we can have AI do that today, amazing, right? Was it value add for me to spend every weekend and night, sitting there reading and codifying and falling asleep while reading? Probably not.
Yeah.
So I do think work is going to shift, right? So we're going to be doing different things. And I think that's okay. And that's how the world works, right? So even if you look back in history, when we had computer, when we had to, just in the research world, stopped having to go to the library and could get information on a computer, great. So did work go away? No. Did work change? Yes. And I think that's what's going to continue to happen.
Yeah, exactly. I feel like we could go off on a different topic, which we're not going to, but the whole, did the fact that you had to suffer through that make the brain that you have today that can look at the data that pops out of Claude? And will people coming out of grad school today, if they skip that step, will they be as smart as you are? That's a conversation for a different day. So, but I want to talk, data's one thing, and we know our friends in private equity love data. One piece of data they really care about are metrics related to money, right? Let's be real. So I want to talk about the real cost of getting a senior hire wrong in a private equity backed company, because, people can say, right, oh, but I'd have a beer with the guy. Why do I need Angela and her science or whatever? But you can show them why they need Angela and her science. Talk to me about that.
Yes. So I've learned this the hard way too, because I have made mistakes. We've made mistakes. I've made mistakes at all parts of my life, and which is why I care so much about assessment and how do we make fewer mistakes? Because when you make the wrong hire, I think minimally it costs you really 9 months to 12 months of delay in creating value in the company. That's aside from all the expense of recruiting, re-recruiting, training. It always takes people time to ramp up. That's in addition to this. But just, if you think about, you take 6 months to figure out, okay, is this person really not going to work out? Well, let's give them another try. And then another 6 months to terminate them. And then, you've easily lost a year of progress. Now, what that means, of course, is that, when you have a longer hold period, You model everything on, well, we do is some private equity model on 3 years. We model on 5 years, 5 years of, a specific return. So if you're taking 6 years, 7 years, if you're not creating disproportionately more value, so you're not doing other things in the value creation plan, then ultimately your IRR is going to go down. Like ultimately it's not good for investors. So, when you increase that timeline, it has a lot of impact, and not to mention even the impact on the workforce of like, oh, this was our leader and now we have a new leader, and like, how do I engage with this leader? And this leader has another way of doing things that I'm not used to. So that slows things down as well. So the time component is massive. The impact on IRR is massive, which then impacts the private equity firm's ability to fundraise, right? So, because they are evaluated on, do they return money on the timeline, and how much money do they return on the timeline? And then, of course, all those other bits and pieces. So it costs us, roughly $200,000 to recruit a new leader, just in recruiting fees, and then the impact on the organization. So I would kind of put the number out there. It's like $1 million, just at least.
This is why this kind of logic is maybe why, like in our work at Lodestone, executive assessment for firms that don't have a U inside, it's one of the easiest things for us to deliver, because the story writes itself of you can spend a little money up front and have a robust psychometric assessment by organizational psychologists and avoid, not perfectly right, because not all, it's science. People, you're still going to get a couple that you're not a perfect prediction on, but just the money saved on getting things wrong is so,
yeah, it's massive.
Yeah. So that's an easy one, I think. Another thing about money and decisions about people, something interesting in your work with GrowthCurve is that unlike many, many firms, one of the first people you put in is a chief people officer. It's not, oh, we got to flip the CFO and there's a great HR lady who does payroll that we're going to put underneath the CFO. Like we see that so many times, and you guys are different. Why?
Yes. So we do think that humans are a big part of the equation of creating value. So the talent we put in place is super critical. Well, if you believe that, and remember, we're driving a massive amount of change in these portfolio companies. So not only are we, trying to create a lot of growth in a short period of time, but we're driving an AI transformation. So we're kind of helping reframe how work is done. We're implementing AI into the product to ultimately serve the consumer, customer, or client better. There's a lot of change. And so when I think, how do we manage this change? How do we make sure that the new team of executives can coalesce? How do I make sure that our recruiting plans are going to stay on time? How do I make sure that people are measured on their performance and those who are contributing the most are paid more? All of that requires a chief people officer. So for us, it's table stakes. It happens in the first, hopefully, month of ownership. Sometimes if we, don't identify the right person, we won't put someone who is subpar into roles. So sometimes it does take us a little longer to recruit. However, it is a super critical role that we have to get right to drive the transformation, to drive the team cohesion, to set up OKRs and know how to measure people, to do the entire talent management for the company. All of that we're requiring at every board meeting. Like every board meeting we ask, tell us about how you're reshaping the organization. Tell us about how you're rewarding the key players. Who are the key players? How do you know they're the key players? And that drives the right behaviors and shows how important the chief people officer role is to the company.
Okay, now thinking about roles, your own role, right? The role of a human capital person in private equity is one of these roles we've seen evolve where people didn't have them, then they had them, but it's mostly search people, and and we can go to conferences and talk a ton about how this role evolves. I'm curious, especially for the sake of other human capital folks that are out there, how do you spend your time? Because your role was created, your firm was created, first of all, right? And so your role was, you didn't have a predecessor. It was created and you got to shape your role. Let's talk about how you spend your time portfolio facing versus with the investment team and, kind of what does a typical week look like?
Great question.
There is no
So
typical week, right?
yeah,
So,
there is no week that. So then I was thinking about, okay, how do I think about it for a year, right? Because when it's performance review time for the firm, I'm spending all my time on the firm. When just do a deal and there's new management team coming in, I spend all of my time working on recruiting for that management team. So if I think about the course of an entire year and what are the averages, I think roughly I spend 20% of my time on playbooks, codifying what's working in one portfolio company that can be reapplied in another portfolio company. So knowledge exchange, best practices, making sure. Right now we created 10 playbooks, and are they stagnant? No, they're going to keep evolving, but just saying like, this is how you do performance management. Here's what good goal development looks like, and here's how to deploy it in your company, just to help people move faster. So 20% of time kind of spent there. Then I think another 20% is on recruiting the right talent into seats. And mostly I spend my time on critical roles in the executive team. The portfolio companies themselves work on the rest of the organization, but I work on the org design to say, like, we think we're going to need to add a data science team. It looks like we're going to need to upgrade the product leadership in this company. And then, making sure we get those right people in the right seats as soon as possible. So maybe that's 25%. And then 20% coaching, mentoring, developing leaders. So this would be like 360 reviews, giving feedback, delivering feedback, team building sessions. So I spend a lot of time, especially when leadership teams are coming together and they're new and they haven't worked together before, making sure that they understand each other, that they're building the trust with each other to like have cohesion and work together to become a high performing team. So that's all I would say on the portfolio side. Then about like 15% in due diligence, like figuring out, is this a company we want to buy? You can call that portfolio or firm. I kind of categorize it as firm. 10% in talent management for the firm itself. So recruiting, promotions, performance reviews, feedback, all of that. And then whatever we have left in firm building. So,
okay.
So when I think about like averages of it, like maybe 75% on the portfolio, 25% on the firm, depending on how you classify due diligence.
Yeah. Love that. And no day is the same, right? That's why you had to look across the entire year. It strikes me that you work on a variety of things, and a lot of what you work on is what we work on at Lodestone. And I can't help but think it's because we have that shared background of everything about behavior at work, whereas other human capital folks in PE firms are more likely to be specialists in a particular domain. Fair to say, you think?
Yes, and often they're recruiters. Like I can tell you, I think about 70% of the human capital leads I meet are former recruiters.
Yeah. And we love them because they can't do all the things we do. So we get to call on them, whereas, you're up on your own and you can do your own thing for the most part.
I still need help, Sandy.
Okay. Well, sometimes it's just a volume thing, right? Like as your portfolio companies grow, even though you can do all those things in all those firms, is that the best?
100%. And I want to be able to call someone like you who I trust and I know who's going to think about things the same way that I do, because I think that's the way to create the most amount of value.
Cool. Thank you for that. Couple of hot take questions, because it wouldn't be a conversation of you and me without getting maybe some hot takes out there. Let's play off of what you just said. The whole, I call someone who thinks like me, who's, I'm going to extrapolate to, is trained like me, because you know what you're getting, basically. There are a lot of people out in the world who think, I know people, I am a person, this stuff comes naturally to me, I'm just a good read of people. Why do so many people think they understand human capital just because they're people or because they've worked with people, and what are they missing?
Yeah, I love that one. And, it's like, well, yeah, this leadership team is the best leadership team in the world. And I say, like, how do you know that? What are your proof points?
Oh, it's
and
in my gut.
Yeah, and we had a great dinner together. He was really a wonderful conversationalist. He's very articulate. But I think like the easiest thing I can explain to folks that say things like that is sometimes the people that are best for the business and best for the role are people that you actually don't like, and because they have the right skills. And often they have different skills from you, and that is okay. So I love it when people understand that and know that they need to surround themselves with people that actually tackle the problem differently, who think about it differently. And often you don't like those people because they're going to challenge you. They're going to like send prickles up your spine because it's like, oh gosh, like, why are you challenging me on that? But at the end of the day, that's going to lead to better results. So I always think through, what is the job to be done? And then how do we build the predictors to predict who will be able to do that job better than anyone else? And it's typically not likability. Like, that doesn't even enter the equation at all. Having a good dinner conversation, not usually a predictor of success running a SMB. So we have to think about what are we trying to predict? Okay, we're trying to predict EBITDA growth at this, ARR growth at this. We're trying to predict exit at this. Okay, well, if that's what we're trying to predict, then, whether you can have a conversation with this guy or not probably doesn't matter. Like, we still need them to be able to present to the board, but we can train that and we can give them the right templates to present to the board. However, we need people who know how to do what we need done and have the skills to coalesce the team. Likability can maybe factor in a tiny bit there. Like, if they're not liked by anyone, then that's probably a problem. But, some of the best employees I've ever had on my team are people that I seriously have no desire to have dinner with. I have no desire to have a drink with, but they're fantastic. And they challenge me to think about things in a different way. They accelerate my ability to diagnose a problem, and they get us to the right results faster, which is more important.
Yeah. And let us just say, it'll come out in the reference checks. It's such a dumb thing to say because whoever is the reference is not going to tell you anything. Like, you and I know there's zero predictive power of normal reference checks against the person's performance. Maybe if you're in there forensically looking for specific competencies, right? But please stop saying the reference checks are going to catch it. Oh my God. Okay. One more hot take one. If you had a magic wand, what would CEOs and deal teams do differently tomorrow? So this is a little bit of, I want them to do this. I still haven't cracked that nut. What would you love to see happen?
So I love magic wand questions. I love reimagining the world to be a very fun place. So I really do think it's treating human capital with the same rigor and speed and objectivity that we're already treating the business and the financial metrics with. So that sometimes, like, I still have, honestly, CEOs I encounter every day who don't quite understand that, and they still think HR is tactical. HR is there to like make sure they negotiate our benefits plans. HR is there to like investigate sexual harassment claims. Yeah, that is very important. Don't take me the wrong way, but there's so much more. And I would get rid of intuition-based decision-making, as we kind of already just talked. So how do we get people to think about prediction? Like, what are we trying to predict and how best to predict it? I'd put talent decisions forward in the deal cycle. Let's move really quickly to figure out, who do we have? Who do we not have? What skills are we missing? What is it going to take to drive this value creation plan as soon as possible and act faster? And then intentional redesign of the organization. So again, let's know how we're going to make a difference in this company. And then let's go to how do we need to be designed? What skill sets are missing? Evaluate the talent, figure it out in a very scientific way, because again, that's going to create time to move faster. So I think those are the main things.
Yeah.
I don't think this shifts overnight. I think it just takes, especially when you have new CEOs coming in who haven't dealt with this mindset before.
Yeah.
It takes a lot of education. It helps when my deal leads are right there with me and they're like, yes, this is a very critical role. And right now, what's most helpful actually is our CEOs of our existing companies with chief people officers talking to new CEOs. And they're saying, like, this person is my right-hand person. Like, I can't imagine doing this without my chief people officer. Like, they have created so much value. They've helped me think about everything, and they are the most important member of my leadership team. And that, like, does more for for it all than like me talking.
Yeah, of course, right? Like it's the best evangelist is someone who's experienced it, and it's not, some talking head saying, go do this or whatever.
Yes, exactly.
You and I care a ton about developing other people and people coming up behind us and all of this stuff. We'd love to see organizational psychologists like us more and more in private equity. But we also know what we learn in grad school doesn't exactly get you ready for the world of private equity. For someone who's earlier on in human capital and wants to work in this space, what are your thoughts on how they earn credibility, that whole translation of science to practitioner, like all of that?
Yeah, I think the easiest way to earn credibility in these roles in private equity is to run the performance reviews for the firm. So oftentimes when you enter, and especially if you're creating the role yourself or you're the first person in it, they've now, private equity people have never been given feedback because they are the smartest person. They were the smartest person in their undergrad program. They were the smartest person in their MBA program. They were the smartest associate analyst, whatever. And they have never been told like what they could improve and how their impact could potentially be even greater if they tweaked these couple things. So to me, by showing them that and like actually helping deliver the feedback and getting that muscle built, they were like, oh, wow. Like, I get it now. I get why this is important in the portfolio because it really helped me as an individual.
Yeah.
So I know a lot of roles you're only portfolio facing, but I do think how to, kind of increase that credibility as soon as possible has the impact on the people themselves who are in the deal team, who, want to accelerate growth in their portfolio.
Yeah, because even if you're not officially responsible for their performance reviews, right? They sort of see you, at least some, as like, this reference might be dated now, but the Wendy Rhodes from Billions, like, oh, there's a psychologist, there's a people person here. I'm going to go and talk to her and pick her brain. And
yes,
doing that, as long as you can set boundaries around it and not let it suck all your time, right? I think can be important. And I imagine you go and do things at the portfolio sometimes together with deal leads too, right? Like they get to see you in action. I know that happened for me when I was in a firm where facilitating a management team with the deal guy present, he was like, oh, I didn't know that.
Right.
That's what you do. You know what I mean? So
absolutely.
anything else, Angela? Any kind of closing? Oh, I know one other thing. That was about people already in human capital. Anything? This is PSYOP week that we're recording this. This is when our people get together. Do you have like a 1-minute pitch on IO psychologists? Here's how you transition into the business world and specifically the business world of private equity.
Yeah, I think in reality, it's about the network, right? So you got me the job I have here because you know about the
you
value.
Got you the job you have there. I made the introduction. Let's be clear.
Yes, but it greatly helps, right? So in being able to find out like, okay, Sandy, you know this world, like what's most important, having those conversations with people who've been there and did it and know what matters, what the language is that you need to speak. All of that is critically important. So honestly, especially to get into private equity, you have to know people. So you're not going to get a shot if someone can't speak about your credibility, if someone can't say like, you need to meet this person, they're really good, they know what they're doing. Because in this world, like it is all about networking and relationships. So build a base so that you have proof points. Like I was able to create value in this company in the following ways. I saw a company scale from X to Y, so from 50 million to 100 million, or I contributed, these are how I supported my CEOs in whatever way. And that you have to kind of do first to prove yourself before going into private equity. But then once you have a couple of those stories, you've seen growth, you know how to drive growth from a human capital perspective. I think IO psychologists are the best suited for this world because we speak the language, we know how to drive outcomes, we know how to diagnose work and reorganize work, and we know what's most important to drive change and transformation.
Well, I mean, boom, you couldn't end on a better comment, I think. So anyway, I think that's our time. I so appreciate you doing this with us. I
Yes.
love chatting with you, whether it's being recorded or not. It was just fun to add that element. So thank you for doing it. And
Yeah.
that is a wrap on this episode of Human
Thank
Capital.
you. Thanks, Sandy.
Quantified. All right, no problem.
See you later.
All right, bye.
Bye.